Hey everyone, and welcome to Lead Your Movement. I'm Angelique Rewers, CEO and founder of The Corporate Agent, and this is our weekly show where we talk to business leaders and entrepreneurs who are using their business platform as a force for good in the world. And we have a really great show on that topic today with one of my favorite people. And I have no doubt you are going to love her as well. If this is the first time that you are joining us, make sure that you are subscribed to our channel under Angelique Rewers over on YouTube, and make sure you're following me on Clubhouse at Angelique Rewers. We have a really fun topic coming up very shortly on there that we're going to be chatting about, something I know that is near and dear to all of your hearts. Today's been an interesting day for me. I feel like my day started around 5 a.m. this morning, and it has been go, go, go all day. I have literally jumped from sort of live stream to live stream today, just back to back. I'm a little bit fired up. Earlier today, I spent 2 hours today on a closed door Zoom meeting with business leaders from all over the world, about 90 business leaders, some top brands that all of you know, talking about the state of the workplace today and the changes that are happening. And so, throughout today's episode, I'm definitely going to share some of my big takeaways as we get into today's topic, which is really all about using your business platform in order to drive forward something that you're passionate about in your life, drive forward positive change while also having a business that actually makes money, that has a problem that's being solved in the marketplace. And I know at the end of the day, a lot of you watching the show, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to have a business that isn't just about fueling the fire, but it's also about being that fire starter at heart. So we're going to talk a lot about that. We are live. If you're joining us Wednesday at 1 p.m., we're live. So let us know you're here. Let us know where you're joining from so that we can interact with you and you can ask your questions today. I hope that you will, especially as we really get into the meat of today's discussion. Um, and I'll share some things that I think you all will definitely want to comment on. Our guest today is the absolutely amazing Amanda Leighton. Amanda is the CEO and founder of Vino Karma, which curates unique events and experiences over great food and even better wine in order to create community, connection, and positive change in the world. In addition, Vino Karma works with organizations in the hospitality and the beverage space, specifically wine and spirits, to help them become socially conscious organizations by creating awareness about their entire value chain. It's going to be a really interesting part of our discussion today. Companies today really have to think about the fact that customers are demanding greater responsibility from them. And so Vina Karma is there to help them make those authentic organizational changes in order to meet really the market's shifting expectations. Amanda has an MBA and more than 20 years of experience working to improve some of the world's biggest brands and top companies, names you all know, like Uber and Amgen and Choice Hotels and GE. She's worked with companies across diverse industries in technology, healthcare, hospitality, and of course, the beverage industry. She and her team's most recent work includes developing a global human capital strategy for the reorganization of one of the largest divisions of a multinational Fortune 100 company to support career growth, hiring, promotion, and retention. Her team has also worked with the largest healthcare organization in mergers and acquisitions to establish a strategy for creating and rolling out company wide anti harassment training. Amanda also recently advised a family owned, family run manufacturing company to strategically realign its leadership team in order to reimagine revenue streams during the pandemic to ensure the manufacturing plant was able to run at 90% capacity and their products could still be brought to market, which, if you've been following the news and you understand what's going on in supply chain and in distribution and logistics, that is nothing short of a miraculous feat. Please welcome to the show the amazing Amanda Leighton.
Hi, Angelique. Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you.
So I'm going to ask you in just a second what movement you're leading, because that's the question I ask all of my guests when they come on, but I have a bone to pick with you.
Uh-huh.
There's something missing from your bio. So
What what is
I
that?
will selfishly share that Amanda is also one of our esteemed faculty members here at the corporate agent, and she is helping to mentor dozens and dozens and dozens of fire starters, our global community of fire starters who are all change agents in their own right. And Amanda is one of our esteemed faculty members, helping us to do that, helping us to expand our capacity to help others build the business platforms that they want to do. So I'm going to plug that in there as part of your bio and give you just a little bit of a hard time. What is the
Well,
movement? Oh,
I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, as you know, one of my favorite positions I've ever held. So I honor you for bringing me in to become faculty with you and your team.
Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit more too, because I think so many people are like, well, I want to do this and I want to do that. And I want to talk about all the different things that you're doing because you're also running Amanda Leighton International, which is different than the Vino Karma project. So we're going to talk about all of that today. First, though, what would you say if you had to boil it down? What is the movement that you're leading?
So at Vino Karma, our tagline is creating change one sip at a time. So I started it with the realization that each of us has a part to play in creating the social change and impact that we want to see in the world. And so that's the movement I'm leading over here at Vino Karma, not only on an individual level, but also on a corporate and collective level.
I love that. And, I love the one sip at a time. It definitely happens through conversations, it happens through relationships. I shared at the top of the show that I just spent 2 hours talking to 89 other business leaders around the world. And we were really asked, how do we change some of these issues that seem impossible to change? And it all starts in conversations. It all starts in small groups getting together, saying, what if we did this? What if this was possible? So I want to talk a little bit more about that as well. Hey, Pat, welcome to the show. And I envy you. Well, I shouldn't say that. I am in South Florida, but I absolutely love Myrtle Beach, and I haven't had a chance to be there in so long. So, welcome from Myrtle Beach. So, Amanda, let me ask you something. So, you have this company, this organization called Vino Karma, which is in addition to Amanda Lane International, which is also out there doing more traditional consulting type work. But I think as folks will see over the course of our discussion, these two things really blend together. But I want to start the top of the show actually talking about something that I think is really interesting to folks. You too use a platform similar to what we do here at Lead Your Movement, in that we sort of bring people together to have a discussion with us. We don't do it as just a podcast. We really do it, in our case, on LinkedIn. We do it live. We're able to have a discussion. In order to drive your mission forward, you also have created a model like this, although yours is somewhat a little bit different than ours. Talk about the Vino Karma show and how you're using that in order to help drive change forward.
Yeah, so there's two elements of the Vino Karma show. The first is a recorded show where I actually interview change makers, tastemakers, and winemakers to highlight what they're doing to create change in the beverage and hospitality spaces. So we really look at three key things. One is diversity, equity, representation, and inclusion. The second is innovation, and the third is social impact. So I talk to them about their journeys, and oftentimes these are folks that are underrepresented in the trade. So people of color, women winemakers, people who might have a brand that also has social impact, or even small business owners that own wine shops or wine bars that really don't get a lot of play in the greater world in terms of looking at that value chain again of the entire industry. The second piece of this is that we still host live events where we reach the end consumer. So, why is this important? Because we believe the end consumer also has a part to play in terms of the dollars they put towards the brands they support, as well as the causes they support. So, with our live events, I interview change makers in the world, people who are extremely influential in politics, in social justice causes. And we also pair that with wines and spirits from underrepresented distillers, winemakers, brewers to then have conversations that really matter, that move people to action.
So, on the sort of first part of that, the recorded interviews, you recently brought on just, oh, I don't know, a little someone onto your show to have a conversation. Tell everybody who was on your show, and then I'm going to dig into how that came to be.
Well, that was actually live. So that
Okay.
was not a recorded show, which is even, I mean, you're doing this live. It's even scarier to do it live. Like recorded, no big deal. But when you have one of Time Magazine's most influential people of 2020, who happened to be Ibram X. Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, so how that came to
Okay, wait,
be.
you got I'm gonna slow you down there because I think I just want you guys to hear this, that this is a Time Person of the Year, as in Time Magazine, and author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, which is obviously a book that is incredibly important and has been talked about. This person is in super high demand right now. So, um, this isn't just another solopreneur that you've invited onto your show. This is a Time Person of the Year, Amanda.
Yes. So, you know, first of all, if people do not know his work, he has written several books. I
Mhm.
would highly suggest people go out there and purchase his books for your own education and shifts in perspective
Yes.
about race in America. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, this came about as we know. Last May, George Floyd was murdered in Minnesota, and June came around, and people were taking to the streets to protest the injustices. And I was, sitting back, I was having conversations with my husband, and I said, you know what? I have a platform. I have a platform. I have a community. I have a network. I need to be part of the change. And so I was like, who can I bring on to Vino Karma that will share with folks um, his perspective, his deep knowledge, his deep expertise? And at the time, there was somebody else that was going to come on. But I reached out to his agent and said, here's the platform I have. Here's our audience. And we want to learn and we want to connect with him. Would he be willing to come on to the show? Well, lo and behold, he said yes. So it was probably one of the most impactful conversations I've had in the past year, in terms of really evaluating what I do and how I show up as a human being, as an ally, and how we continue to move Vino Karma forward with our community.
And I mean, for those of you who've not watched the episode with Professor Kendi, and I saw it as a post recorded, so I didn't realize it was live. It's an incredible conversation. And so, let me ask you a question. I think that there are a lot of folks right now. One of the things I love about what you're doing with the Vino Karma project and the show in particular is that you're using the platform in order to host really important conversations. And you're also using it, like you said, in many ways to help those who in the wine, spirit, and hospitality industry who perhaps don't get the visibility that they need in order to have a platform and that specifically seeks out and creates that platform to do that. When you were thinking of doing this, when you were thinking of getting this off the ground and doing this, what came up for you from a mindset perspective about creating this platform and going out inviting these folks to come onto your platform and getting it started? Was it something, this is not I don't mean this to be a leading question. Was it something that you're like, I'm just going to do it? Or did you have some reluctance of, is anyone going to say yes to coming on to this show?
So I should kind of backtrack. I've actually had the brand and the label for Vino Karma since 2014. So
Mhm.
I created this in 2014. The goal was that I was actually going to create a wine that gave back to social justice causes that are important to me. So, we now see what happened in the marketplace. There's a lot of other wines out there that do that. So, although I may have been ahead of the game in my head, I certainly wasn't ahead of the game in bringing it to market. And so I've been sitting on this, knowing that there was this big idea, this big vision I want to create in the world. And definitely, I think there's a lot of people that can relate when they have something that feels bigger than themselves, of going through real, like, roller coasters of self doubt. And there are times where I feel very uncertain about this. There are times where I feel like, well, what am I doing and who am I to be bringing this and who am I to talk to Ibram X Kendi? Oprah interviewed him the day after I interviewed him. I'm no Oprah. I'm not a trained presenter or interviewer. Like, so I think to answer your question, yes. I mean, there have been times where I've really asked myself if this is what I'm meant to be doing. And then I get these little nuggets of validation along the way. One being the yeses that I continue to get, and I'm still shocked every time I get them. I'll give you another example. There's a winemaker who's very well known in America named Andre Houston Mack. He was named the first Black man to be the Young Sommelier of the Year many years ago. And then he has brought a couple of brands into the forefront. So one of his brands he has is OPP. It's a Pinot Noir. It's out of Oregon. It's a really cool wine. And when I thought, you know what, I'm going to move to recorded shows, I think I have more. I want to really highlight these underrepresented people in the trade. I reached out to him directly and said, hey, Andre, you don't know me. I drink your wines. Could you come on my show? He was the first person to say yes. And he said, anything I can do to be of support for Vino Karma because the movement matters. So I know that's a long answer to your question, Angelique, but there are definitely times where I do face the self-doubt and I face naysayers. I'm also very well aware that with how I look and my own privilege, that at some point with certain topics I'm talking about, I may get some people pushing back, up against me. But that's also okay because this to me is bigger than me.
Amazing. And I love that. Thank you for being so honest about the fact that you sort of kind of started this a few years ago and it was not maybe as visible. It was sort of really like, well, I'm still working. It was in the I'm working on it phase, right?
Yes.
Things live. And I would just really challenge our audience, how many things, especially that thing that's really in your heart that you want to do, that impact that you want to have in the world, that you're still working on it instead of getting it out into the world in some way. And a welcome to Evan and to Beatrice and others who are here with us. Um, but I do think too many missions and sort of passion projects that people know they're meant to do during this lifetime stay in that sort of
Mm.
closet of working on it. When you started to have these conversations, it also thrust you back into a world that you had worked in back when you were in your early corporate days. So take folks back for just a second. You didn't just wake up one day and say, "Oh, I like wine, so I think I'm going to go focus on the wine and spirits industry." You actually have a background in wine and spirits.
Yeah, so I actually started my career in the wine trade. I lived abroad um, for a decade, and I went to wine school, the WSET school in London. I started my career. I worked on all sides of the business. I worked in a retail shop. I worked in sales. I worked in marketing. I really wanted to understand the business. Not only that, I love this business. I mean, this business for me brings together everything I love. So it brings together a really unique product, um, really, really unique people and their stories. It brings together culture and it's very academic and intellectual. There's also a lot of history to this industry. So, we could get into tons of history about the wine industry, but that's where I started my career. I then subsequently left it. I came back when I moved back to America. I worked for a distributor and I worked for Moet Hennessy. And then I left that and started my own wine import and distribution business. So there were a few things that happened along the way where I ended up leaving that, starting Amanda Leighton International. And then there's been this niggling thing in the background of like, I went to wine school for 5 years. I understand the trade. I had to learn the trade in America because it's so different than living in the UK and selling in the UK and Northern Ireland. But it is an industry that I love, and having been out of it for a couple of years, I'm now starting to see the change that I wanted to see when I was fully in it.
And one of the things that you've seen in this industry in particular is I don't want to say necessarily a reluctance, but a real challenged to change, to
Yeah.
evolve. We talk about all the time at the corporate agent, we're talking about companies get stuck in inertia, industries get stuck in inertia, entrepreneurs get stuck in inertia. Breaking out of that is really hard. There are certainly forces that are helping with that right now. Actually, the pandemic is certainly a disruptive force, right? That's
Yes.
changing that. Um, but I also think that people are becoming so much more aware.
Oh.
And I mean, it's just sort of been tremendous the way the conversation has changed in the last year. I mean, just really a different type of conversation. So, what are some of the things that you're seeing in the wine and spirits industry that have still been slow to change that you would like to really drive a
Mhm.
positive new normal around?
So we're definitely seeing the conversation, the for inclusivity in the industry gain momentum. And I really, really love that. However, we still have, I think there's 13 of wineries in the United States, which distribute 75% of the products across the United States. There's top 3 to 4 distributors in the United States that control what actually gets onto our shelves. And so
Mhm.
we still also have, the folks that are in the seats of power don't necessarily look like the consumer. So if you think about who has the buying power in America right now, we have different generations which are coming up. We have millennials, which are buying differently. We have Gen Z, which is the most ethnically diverse generation that we have ever seen. And they really care about social causes. So, these are the things that we're starting to talk about with brands, with winery owners, with winemakers. And as you mentioned, the pandemic has done something incredible, which it has shortened the time, the methods in which consumers can actually get their wines, their spirits direct from cellar door. So, here in America, we have this 3-tier system. We can argue the merits of it, pros and cons, and I think that's a long conversation. But the things that have to change is that we have to start to see diversity in the positions of power of those that make decisions as it trickles down and as it aligns with the consumer who's buying. And so, Angelique, I mean, obviously, we know in this day and age, we have something called the cancel culture, which I disagree with. However, what that tells us is that more and more consumers are savvy, they are smart, and they are paying attention to how brands are putting their marketing out there, how they're spending their dollars, what they're putting their money towards, how they're treating their employees, how they're treating their vineyard workers.
Mm.
And if they're seeing, if they walk into the cellar door or they walk into a winery and who is actually serving them. And so these are all of the things that we want to continue the conversation about. And we want to help organizations say, what do we do to be part of that change in our entire value chain and to really, really start moving the needle and not just have it be conversation that isn't moving to action?
I think the value chain discussion is such an interesting one. On one hand, there's the part of my brain that says they have to look at this. And then there's the other part of my brain that just got out of this meeting with some of these global brands. And I won't say, anything that's identifying or anything like that, but I look at some of like what's happening still inside of companies, and I at times can't believe we're still there. There is
Oh,
a
yeah.
part of me that's like, I can't believe we're still talking about this, right? Like, how are we still here on some of these issues? And we broke out into groups and we were having these really interesting discussions. And I happened to be in the pay equity group. So my discussion topic today was around pay equity. And the first question that was put out was, is it possible to create, pay equity in organizations, right? And so you know me. So my response is like, well, Of course, it's possible. The question is really how, right? I mean, the like how what is the path to get there is really the question. Of course, that's, we're not asking pigs to fly here. Like this is right. Like, and I think it's really interesting when we look at the value chain, Amanda, because companies are also still struggling with it just within their own walls. The wine and spirits industry is very decentralized. It's global, it's decentralized, there's different sort of power players at different levels. What do you think that the leaders need to do inside of some of these organizations in order to create accountability and insist upon better equity all along that value chain? Because you can have a brand that does everything right within their walls, but who picked those grapes and how those people were treated that even gets to the wine that's on the shelf? That's a big problem. So, what do they do? How do they create that accountability, and how are you helping to lead those conversations around that?
Well, I think one, the simplest answer is to actually be willing to have the conversation. There are several brands that are out there that aren't having the conversation or saying this isn't a problem for us. I
Mm.
truly believe that if companies, if brands, if these large wine organizations aren't having conversations about this now, they will be irrelevant in less than a decade because people are demanding more. And so, one of the things around equity is really to look back and say, are we paying a fair wage in the vineyards? Are we actually supporting different ethnicities, different thought perspectives as we move people from the vineyard to the front of house in a tasting room, up through the organization? Are we actually giving people opportunities? Oh, and also, if we talk specifically about the wine industry, it's an expensive industry to break into. So and there's something that really gets my goat, and this is off topic, and I'm going to share it. But
Please do.
yeah, so um, if we don't allow for people who may not have access to the industry to come into the industry, then that's also a barrier to entry. So when I say it's expensive, if you're going down on the traditional tracks in the wine industry, whether be it master of wine or master sommelier, whether you want to be on the floor and do service or you want to work on the business side, it's really expensive to learn about wine. You have to have access to some of the top wines in the world. I was lucky enough when I started my career that I lived in London and I knew a bunch of somms, and we would get together, we would taste together, we would share bottles of wine. I knew collectors who would give me wines to taste. But that doesn't happen for everyone. It also doesn't happen for everyone when you don't see a path forward or you don't know this career exists for you because you don't see somebody that looks like you. So I think part of it is, how do we create equity? Well, we give access. How do we give access? We start to fund people in the underrepresented communities to actually come into the industry and to allow them to see all sides of the trade. So I think that's definitely one way we can do it. I'll share a little anecdote. And then I'll tell you what gets my goat. But I'll share an anecdote. I recently interviewed a gentleman named TJ Douglas, who owns the Urban Grape out of Boston.
Mhm.
And it's a wine shop, and TJ is a Black man. And so we had a conversation about right after George Floyd's murder, what happened to his shop, because there was looting and there was rioting in Boston after the peaceful protesters left. And I would urge people to go and listen to probably the first 2 minutes of that interview because it will bring you to tears. But the second thing he shared with me is that he recognizes this problem. And so at the Urban Grape, they said, well, I'm not seeing anybody come into the shop that actually is a person of color to apply for a role. So, what can we do to be part of the change? So, they created a scholarship with Boston University to bring people through the wine program at Boston University. In the month of June or June, July, because they started it then, they raised over $175,000 to bring people into the wine industry. So, when they come through this scholarship, they work for TJ, they work for a distributor, and they work front of house at a restaurant in Boston. So they get to see parts of the hospitality industry. The first two people of color are right now going through that program, and they were just short of being fully endowed so that they can give this for life through Boston University. So those are the kinds of things that, like, TJ is a small shop. It's not like he and his wife Hadley have tons and tons of dollars behind them, but they're like, we can be a force for change. So I think leaders in these top really big organizations need to stand up and take note. If TJ Douglas and Hadley Douglas can do this, so can you. So that's one thing. The second thing, so recently I interviewed two women, um, uh, one named Bridget Albert and Julie Milroy, and they both work for Southern Wine and Spirits. And Bridget mentioned something to me that I had never thought about, and these are why these conversations are so important. When we were talking about, she's a master mixologist. So we have the master sommelier, we have master of wine, and we have master mixologist. And she said, one of the things that's really key here is that language matters. So you imagine if you are sitting your exam, master of wine exam or master som exam, and you have to refer to people as master, and you are a woman or you are a person of color, that just continues to perpetuate, really putting down underrepresented people, and continues to perpetuate something which is, this long held belief of elitism and oftentimes racism. So these are things that we really can start to look at and dismantle if we want to have true equity, representation, and inclusion, and start to move towards pay equity as well.
Wow. Yeah, that is, oh my gosh, there's so much there, you guys. Let's all just kind of sit with that and pick all of that up, because there is so much in that and I love it. Oh my gosh, I feel like this episode, which we did have to shift for because of a retreat and some other things that you and I have going on, and it's so ironic and yet not that it happened today when I just got out of this other conversation where we were talking about pay equity and some of these other issues and how important language is in all of this. I love the story that just came out of United Airlines in the last couple of weeks. United Airlines, who I'm not a fan of. Do you guys remember? I don't know if you guys remember this or not. And Alicia and Jay and Hazel and Tara, thank you all for your amazing comments. So, I don't know if you guys remember this. It was like 8 years ago, at least, when United Airlines had that viral video that this musician made about United Breaks guitars. Do you guys all remember United Breaks
Yes.
guitars? If you don't go look it up, it's still very catchy. It's still in my head, and I never really forgave them for breaking that musician's guitar. But nonetheless, see how branding can do. I mean, you're in big trouble with social media. But United just launched something, Amanda, that reminds me of this, because in order to become a pilot, you have to go through very expensive flight lessons. Which costs a tremendous amount of money. And then you also have to have so many flight hours on your own, essentially, which is very expensive. And
Mhm.
then you have to become a regional pilot, which is very difficult because those jobs don't tend to pay very well, and you're flying all the time, and so it's really tough to do that. And in addition to that, there are a lot of women and people of color who don't even consider becoming a pilot because they don't see it as really even a choice. It's not even really presented to them, right? And so United Airlines has said, look, this is really expensive to become a pilot. If we want more diverse pilots, flying for United, we actually have to put money and resources into that way, way back. Like, this isn't something that we can just look at sort of our existing pool of applicants. We have to go outside of our company to our value chain of talent, and we actually have to fund the talent 10 years earlier if
Mhm.
we want to see more diverse talent. So I do feel like that's one of the things that's changing about the conversation. Instead of us just saying, oh, let's just have a leadership program to take directors that are already inside of a company or what have you and try to push them into leadership. It's the idea of, are we funding it way back where the problem actually first starts? And I love that you're doing that. And I love that you're bringing up the language piece of it. And part of this too, it seems like you're touching on, is about changing the perspective of all of this. One of my favorite things that happened today, my least favorite thing that happened today on today's session, I shared this with Amanda in the green room, was that, and look, it seems like a small thing, but one of the presentations when it was referring to men and women was still using pink and blue. And I was just like, no, no, please don't do that. Let's move past the pink and blue for men and women here. Um, but one of my favorite things is, and I won't say which brand because it's a major brand, but their head of human resources, one of their other folks was there, and they said, look, that when our global head of human resources, who happens to be a female, is asked how do we build the case for more women in leadership? How do we build the business case for more people of color or more from the LGBTQ plus community or whatever it is, whatever diversity piece we're talking about? How do we build a business case for that? And her response essentially is, and I'm paraphrasing because this was paraphrased, but essentially, that's an irrelevant question. Why do we have to have a business case for men in leadership? Like, no
Yeah.
one's asking for the business case for why men are in leadership or white men are in leadership or white, like no, or white women or whatever it is. Like, no one's asking for that business case. So why do we have to build a business case for anybody else to be in leadership? Like, what kind of stupid ass question is that? And I loved that was like my favorite thing from today. Like, why are we even having to, justify these questions? And what I love that you're sharing today right now is just companies saying, that's it. We're just going to do something about it. We're not going to just say, oh, we have to we're going to put our money there, our resources there, not just put it on folks to have to go through some coach program. It's like, no, this is like, we're going to make sure that the financial support to create diversity early on is there. What else are you seeing happen in the space that's a good news story?
So I see. I actually think this is a very exciting time for this industry because this industry, it's been around for 7,000 years, and only in the past
Mm.
10 years have we seen the wine industry start to innovate. Like, oh wait, beers in cans? Why don't wine in cans? Eureka! Like, I mean, it's not that difficult. So, the innovation that's coming out, the new brands that are coming out, especially like those wine in cans, I think the shift towards really listening to the consumer. There are brands out there that are saying, the consumer wants something ready to drink right now. They want ease of use. They want to be able to go to their kid's soccer game and have a little roadie while they're watching soccer. And so we can put something in cans for them. I also think really the look at sustainability from a packaging standpoint. So we had Tetra Packs a few years ago. We now have cans. We're looking at recycled bottles. That whole movement, the movement about natural wine in terms of what minimal intervention in wine and what are we doing to really be sustainable and give back to the earth. There's a lot of winemakers who are really focused on that right now. I think what's also extremely interesting right now is the confluence between what the consumer wants and cultural icons or cultural things that are happening in America right now. So one of those things being a lot of celebrities are getting into wine and spirits right now, and there's a reason for it, as well as, really matching like what's going on right now, which is significant. Like we as Americans, for example, the number one genre of music we listen to is hip hop. So marrying hip hop and wine and the culture that comes together and being able to speak to a different urban audience is really, really cool. So those are some things I'm loving. I'm also just loving watching some of these female winemakers come up and finally get recognition, and female spirit brand owners get recognition. So, it is a very exciting time. And there are communities finally starting to come together. So the silos are starting to break down. So women are talking to Black women, are talking to the white men who are in the seats of power. And this is kind of the first time I've seen that in the history of when I've been in the trade, as well as the push right now because of the pandemic to actually innovate and think differently about the customer is really, really key, and it's exciting to watch.
I absolutely love that. I have to share some of these comments that are coming in. I'm gonna have to rethink. We have to put up Jay's comment. Jay, thank you so much for sharing this. I will, because of this, Jay, I will give a slight nod
Oh.
of approval that if United is offering non-binary gender options when booking flights, and now they're also putting their money into building diversity way back in the pipeline of more diverse pilots, I have to say I'm starting to rethink my perception of United. I might have to, we'll see. I'm not there yet, but I love this. And I'm also thinking to myself, are they the only ones? How are the other airlines not doing that by now? How is that still a thing? Um, Tara, can we throw Tara's comment up here? I just facilitated this conversation with chief HR officers. One leader shared that data is a slap in the face. He shared if they continue down their
Oh.
current track record of who gets promoted, the CEO's granddaughter wouldn't ever get a chance to be on their leadership team. Wow. So one of the leaders, Tara and Amanda and everyone that shared in this last meeting I just came from, said that their company would take over 90 years to get sort of, if they kind of moved on it, the path that they were, it would take about 90 years to get more, truly equitable leadership in the organization, 90 years. And then someone else related something that I thought was really interesting. When they first went to their leadership team, they had a CEO, Amanda, who this particular brand had a CEO who was very committed to getting more equity of leadership at the sort of first line manager level. They had, I think it was about 30%, 32% women. They wanted to get to 50%, truly equitable at first line managers. And so they said they were committed, they were going to do it. They set a very specific goal. And when they went and talked to the recruiting and HR department about this goal, they said, in order to make that, we would like literally only be able to hire women leaders. Like we would only, like there's no way we can make that goal. And not, and they basically were like, okay. Like their attitude was like, get it done. We're going to
Mm.
have equity. Like enough. We're going to just get it done. We have to stop talking about it. We have to do it. So they did. They said, I mean, I'm not saying they didn't hire any men. I'm just saying they were like, this is a real goal. We're not just going to keep talking. We're going to make it happen. They ended up beating their goal by a full year. Which is just incredible. And I think it comes down to, it's like it's always about a decision, right? I mean, all of
Oh,
these
yeah.
companies even deciding to put wine in a can. I mean, at some point, it's just a damn decision.
Yeah, and there's a shocking stat in the wine industry too, which is, well, a couple of shocking stats. One, of all the family-owned, family-run businesses in the wine industry, um, only two are, and there's a lot, and they're large. Only two are run by women who are non-family members. So there are only two female presidents
Interesting.
or CEOs in running major family-owned, family-run businesses in the United States. That is ridiculous. Not to mention the fact that there are 1% of vineyard owners, winemakers in the wine trade. It's roughly 1% are African American. So, again, there's like, how do we start to move again closer to equity? Well, as we're saying, it has to start further back. People also have to see themselves in it. They have to be able to see the path ahead. And part of, what we do at Vino Karma is when I'm having conversations with these incredible winemakers, tastemakers, change makers, is be able to put them to the fore to say, this is somebody that you can follow in their paths. Although, some of them don't necessarily want to be that inspiration, or kind of overnight they became that inspiration, especially in 2020. They've had to do their own reckoning with themselves in terms of what position that puts them in, and also being okay with taking the reins of that position to lead others into this industry where diversity, equity, and representation is so needed.
Mm. So what do we do? So I love this comment from Evan down here about Wu-Tang's Lambrusco
Oh,
Sparkling Red. So I'm going to try it. I'm going to put that
it's
on
behind me,
my
actually.
list. Do you have it?
Yeah, it's actually behind me. So when I was talking about the cultural influences of wine, there's a guy out there who's doing some really cool things with branding and marketing named Jermaine Stone. Also, he also calls himself the Wolf of Wine and a couple other names, aka something. But I had a conversation with him recently, And Wu-Tang, Raekwon, the chef of Wu-Tang, created this dry Lambrusco style red wine, or slightly off dry. Really, really great wine, really cool packaging. And Jermaine is helping him, really market it and bring it into the market, especially hitting, certain consumers that want that kind of wine. So it's very cool what is happening. Like I said, the confluence of culture and change, and also celebrities stepping in a good way and being voices for change.
I love it. I love that you said off dry, by the way. That's probably the only time I can think of one upcoming episode that might get dropped on a Lead Your Movement. So you all are going to have to stay tuned because in early June, we have a very special episode, very, very special episode coming up on Lead Your Movement. But I won't say more about it just yet. What should all of us do? Those of us who we love the wine and spirits industry. I certainly love wine, although certainly I love my organic wine that doesn't give me a headache. But what should we do to better support? Like, what's the easiest way? What should we look for? How can we help hold these brands accountable? What should we do as consumers?
Mhm.
Obviously, as change makers. So, I first want to say for those of you who are out there leading your movements, you're using your business platform to drive this. I just want to say one of the big messages we heard from the companies today was be bolder. Be bold in the conversations you're having. Question the status quo. Question why it has to take so long to make a change. Why can't it be done faster? Really speak up. I think. I want to go back, Amanda, and just look at this one. I wrote so many notes today. It was absolutely incredible. Um, but really the one of the closing questions was, who are you not to speak up? Who are you not to be bold? Who are you not to question the status quo, as opposed to who am I to do it?
Yeah.
Really the question is, who are you not to do it? We don't really have the luxury of not doing it. And I loved that energy and that takeaway today of like, who are we not to drive the change forward? Like, how dare we not, so
Yeah.
we can certainly vote with our dollars. What are some good ways that we can do that, especially those of us on here who are wine lovers or
Well,
or martini lovers?
yeah, first and foremost, I agree with that sentiment. There's no excuse in today's day and age to not inform yourself. It's okay if we don't know because we're all learning every single day. But once you know, then it's up to you to take the action to do better and to use your dollars better. So number one, I would say, it is hard in the wine industry. So, people who so I, there's winemakers out there who have started their craft from scratch. Roughly, if you're to start a winery now in Walla Walla, Washington, and you only make 10,000 cases of wine, it's going to cost you $4 million of investment. And you're not going to turn a profit for 7 to 10 years. It is extremely hard. So, number one, go out there and support these small winemakers, small distillers, these people that really can't get national distribution because they don't have enough product, and buy directly from the cellar door. Number two, do your research. So there's a lot that's been going on in the wine industry. Things kind of went a little bit wrong for the quartermaster sommeliers this past year because of the sexual harassment claims. A lot of master somms had to step down. Know who is serving you, know what the wine brands stand for. There are plenty of brands out there right now that actually post their social justice causes. They post what they invest in, they post how they use their dollars, they post how they give back to the community. And so it's really important that you support those people. Also, I would say support your local wine shop. Please, 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 because they are really struggling right now. And now that the world is slightly opening back up, please go support your local restaurants. They need all of your support that they can get. So I think one, it's just, again, be informed and do the research, and then really support these smaller producers.
I love that. And I think I feel like so many of us um it feels really good when we make and we always try. And I think one thing I always like to remind people is, if you make a purchase because you think you are supporting something and then it comes out that, well, maybe in their supply chain somewhere they weren't watching as closely as they should and something happened. Don't let that deter you from continuing to be a socially conscious consumer, because it is complicated. There are
Yeah.
companies that try to do everything right, and if you're an entrepreneur, you know it can be hard to keep your eye on every moving part. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to get it right 100% of the time. Try to get it right 100% of the time, but no, you won't. And then, but don't stop being a socially conscious entrepreneur. I think I hear that sometimes from people. Well, it doesn't matter anyway. I'm like, no, it matters. Not every company is going to get it right all of the time, but please continue to vote with your dollars. I could keep going with this conversation. We actually are going to pick this conversation up in June with someone from the wine industry, a very special person from the wine industry joining us in early June. I cannot wait to pick this up. Until then, how can folks connect with you? How can they find out about the show, your Vino Karma show, so that they can also find out about folks that you're supporting on your platform, and then they can go support those people?
So it's easy to find us. Our website is www.vinokarma.com. That's VinoKarma. So vino meaning wine, karma meaning what you give back to the world. You can also go to our YouTube page, which is you just search Vino Karma. We have a LinkedIn page as well. And on Instagram, we are at Vino Karma underscore project. So I do hope that folks will come out and continue to support us. And I'm always happy to connect with anybody inside or outside of the trade, particularly as folks are leading their own movements and creating the change they want to see in the world as well.
I absolutely love this. I love this conversation and what we covered today. I'm so fired up. I don't know who put the fire, but I am really fired. I was already fired out when I got off the other conversation about what's going on in the world and kind of where we are with some pieces of this, and then land it right here in this conversation. So there is a lot of energy coming at all of you today. Amanda, this has been so great. You inspire me. You truly inspire me. I'm so honored to have you on our faculty here for the little bit of time that we can have you a part of our team. I just want to thank all of you who are here and contributed to the conversation today, and encourage you to go have a bold, courageous conversation with someone, whether that's a prospect, an existing client, your team, a community. Go forward and keep having bold conversations. That's how we get things changed, even just becoming aware of some of the issues so that we can help conceptualize the solutions and drive those forward. So, thank you all so much for being here. We are actually, quick programming note, next Wednesday, Amanda and the Firestarter faculty will all be flying in and joining me in South Florida. If you can believe it,
Yay.
we
Can't
are
wait.
having we are having an in-person retreat. About 50% of our clients are coming in to be in person, and the other 50% are joining us via Zoom. We have been working on protocols around this for probably 2-3 months now to work out the social safety, like all the safety stuff. I'm going to get to see clients in person. I'm going to get to see faculty in person. I can't believe it. But that does mean that we will be taking a quick hiatus next Wednesday, since we'll be on site, and we'll be back 2 Wednesdays from today, back again live with another powerful, bold conversation. So until then, Amanda, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody for joining us. Until next time, this is Angelique signing off.